Welcome, everyone, to You Bet Your Fertilizer. And I am one of your hosts, Jared Hornbeck, coming to you from Brooklyn, New York, the horniest town in all of the galaxy. But you know what? I am not the only person who is here going around and introducing myself to all the females of Prospect, Connecticut. No, who else is here with me?
Well, it's me, Steve Guntley, creamy, steamy, and ever so dreamy. This is the podcast about Jewish rednecks, Groucho carrots, and one left quickly followed by two rights. That's because this is the podcast about Galactic Gigolo, the last of our gonzo comedy treats from Connecticut bad boy Gorman Bechard and his dearly departed cohort, Carmine Capobianco. A fun little journey that we've been on. We recently covered the third movie, Cemetery High, just last week. And then we covered his first film, Psychos in Love, about a year ago. And they always surprise. Let me tell you that much, at least. They always surprise, and they are very distinctly films with a vision and films with a style. So we're excited to talk about them.
Steve, can I stop you for 1 second? Two quick things so people can put their angry tweets down. One, this is the Psychos in Love being the first of the like Charles Band distributed of Gorman Bechard's movies, not his first movie.
Yes.
But just everyone put your tweets down. We caught that before it got too far. But and also the other thing about it was something that I completely forgot. So how about that? Let's just hand it over then to our very special guest, because I had a second thing there and it'll come back to me eventually. I'm gonna step on Steve's feet for a second here. Special guest, who are you? Who's here with us?
Hi, my name is Nick Cato, and I had the pleasure of seeing Galactic Gigolo on good old 42nd Street by myself, but it was happened to be a packed afternoon showing for some reason, and I got to become friends with star Carmine and met the director several times. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to bring to this wonderful comedy.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to hear some of your personal anecdotes, because these guys are some really interesting artists in terms of like the people that we cover on this show. They have a real I don't know, their mentality doesn't totally gel with everything else that we're talking about. In a lot of ways, movies are trauma movies. They feel a lot closer in tone to the sort of like wacky, hypersexual cartoonishness of a Lloyd Kaufman joint, and they have that kind of energy. So it's kind of interesting to see this underneath a full moon banner, or underneath an Empire banner. So they're always fascinating, and it's always just a really a strikingly different experience watching one of these movies.
Yeah, I heard somebody or maybe read somebody refer to this as like how they felt about like the Bruce Campbell, Sam Raimi relationship, where it was like there was just stuff that they were doing, and then I know they brought up like the movie, is it Wise Guys or Crime Wave?
Yeah, Crime Wave.
Crime Wave being kind of this, what was considered at the time to be this like huge misstep that I think is maybe sort of been reappraised a little bit in recent years.
At least a little bit. I watched it like less than a year ago. Crime Wave is an interesting misfire. Like you see the bones of what they wanted to do more than what they actually did. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, Nick, that's amazing. I was gonna make sort of a joke when you said that you saw it on 42nd Street. I was gonna kind of butt in and say, so you were the one. But then, you said that you were in a packed theater, which whatever my feelings about this movie might be, and I think I'll just lay my cards on the table. I'm going to be a little bit more critical with this one than I was with Cemetery High, especially with Psychos in Love.
Yeah.
But the fact that there was an audience for this at that time, I can appreciate. Like, there's a lot of stuff happening in this movie that a lot of it isn't necessarily stuff I can get behind, and I view it a little bit differently than I viewed Psychos in Love, which I kind of was on board with what they were doing from frame one in that movie. Here, it's like it's very much more hit or miss to me, but describe the scene. I mean, I grew up in New York City also, so I was not old enough to be seeing this in the theater on 42nd Street. I was a kid at the time, but like, describe that scene, because the 42nd Street theater kind of vibe is something that's sorely missing from New York in 2026. And so I would love for you to kind of just set the scene of what that was like.
Okay, well, just slight backstory. I think Psychos in Love came out on VHS maybe 8 months before Galactic Gigolo, because he shot them both the same time pretty much.
Mhm.
And I was a huge Psychos in Love fan. I've rented it 1,000 times. I actually bought the VHS off my mom and pop shop at the time, still have it. And so when I saw there was a double feature thing going on called Urban Classics.
Mhm.
And they had done, the first one was Creepazoids and Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity. We all went to see that. It was all right. But when Galactic Gigolo came out, that played in a double feature with Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bolorama, and everyone worshipped Linnea Quigley, back then. Was pretty much still fresh off of Return of the Living Dead. She was in every other film. And most people were there for her and for Michelle Bauer. I was there to see Carmine Capobianco. I was a psycho. I loved all those people, but I loved Carmine. I'm fellow Italian, all of that stuff. And there were a couple of people there who, every time the three of them showed up, Debbie and Frank Stewart, I think the first time they showed up in Galactic Gigolo, I rewatched it about a week ago. I think they were sitting in a car together and the theater cheered. And this is a Saturday afternoon. And I said, wow, maybe this little Psychos in Love group, maybe they're onto something here. And the theater I saw it at was called the Sin, or the Cine 42 Twin Theater. It was mid-size, a decent size. But, to see a packed house on a Saturday afternoon for these types of films,
Sure.
it was amazing. So it had its fans. Like, again, most of them were there for the other feature, but there were laughs. This type of film, in my opinion, you have to see it with an audience. Sitting in your living room by yourself, I still chuckle at it, but it's not half as funny as it is with a crowd that's throwing things, and which was the norm back then.
Yeah, I could see that working a little better, because this has, I think I probably enjoyed, it's from the sound of it, I probably enjoyed this movie a little more than Jared did. But like I've had a good time to varying degrees with all of these movies. I know that Gorman Bechard, as we covered last week, he I don't know if you know about this, Nick. He left a review of his follow-up movie Cemetery High on IMDb, where he basically said, don't watch this piece of shit. This is not my movie. It got chopped all to hell. And he lumped Galactic Gigolo in with that. He didn't really talk much about it, but you've kind of got to know those guys. Do you know a little bit about how they feel about how this movie turned out? Were they disappointed like they were with Cemetery High, or was this generally what they wanted?
I actually spoke with Carmine about it a lot more than Gorman. I asked Gorman quickly. They did a screening of Psychos in Love at the Nighthawk, I think back around 17.
Mm-hmm.
They were both there. I spoke with him a little. He really didn't want to discuss it. Carmine was happy enough with it. I don't think he was. I think Psychos was his favorite of everything he did, but I don't know. I think I was more into it than both of them.
Interesting, yeah.
Which is always funny to me when you're more into somebody's piece of, whatever it is, their book, their film, than they are. But I think they were happy with it. I don't think they were happy. I have to listen to your Cemetery High episode, because I know neither one of them ever even mentioned that around me.
They were unhappy with it. Originally, it had the title Assault of the Killer Bimbos. And Charles Band basically took that title and gave it to a completely different movie. And they weren't happy about that. And they felt like it was kind of chopped to hell. They had a darker vision in mind than what they finally released, which was much closer to a wacky comedy, had a bunch of big plot holes, so I can understand why they were miffed. I'm curious to see what their kind of uncut vision was. But yeah, but tell us a little bit about how you got to know these guys and a little bit of your association with them, because I find them so fascinating.
Well, back in the dial-up days of the internet, everyone was on AOL, and for a long time, about 4 years, I hosted a chat about once every month or so. We called it Real Horror Fans, REEL. It was a million blogs called that. And I had met Carmine and Gorman on AOL and other chat rooms, and I actually bought Gorman had actually sold me a Psychos in Love poster very cheaply and signed it for me. And I asked him, would you want to come into this chat? And he had never been in a guest on a chat like that. And he came in. Carmine did an episode a few months. I wish I could have saved all of this at the time. You could save it as like a print file, but I just never said. I wish I would have. And I ran one podcast back in 2017 for about 7 episodes that I had Carmine on, but the sound came out terrible. I didn't know what I was doing.
Mhm.
But yeah, just mostly email. And Carmine I eventually spoke with on the phone many times. I got to interview him for my first book, Suburban Grindhouse, and it was mainly about his time in Galactic Gigolo. So he gave me a couple of nice stories about the filming of that.
Yeah, my understanding is that like Carmine, from everything I've heard, was very, very approachable, very outgoing, very friendly. I know he had a really good relationship with Matt Desiderio from Forbidden Planet, who I know you know as well, Nick. And so Matt did the Psychos in Love episode with us when we did that. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. When Steve had said earlier, he said about a year ago. I thought about it and I'm like, Psychos in Love was real early in our run. I think that was still in 2023. We did
Times
episode.
of Flat Circle.
That was exactly what I was going to say to follow it up too. That it really doesn't matter, but it's like I was like, oh, that was way more than a year ago. But no, he did the Psychos in Love episode, and I know he had become friends with Carmine Capobianco. And I do want to backtrack slightly, and maybe not. I don't know that I have anything to apologize for, but I was a little harsh in the Cemetery High episode in terms of kind of pontificating on what kind of person Gorman Bechard is. And I posit the idea that maybe he was kind of an insufferable asshole in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And I realize I have nothing to back that up. I'm not trying to libel anyone, you know what I mean? Or speak out of turn. It's just, I was thinking about all of his kind of taken in context, pull quotes and sound bites about how Cemetery High came out. And I kind of landed on like Cemetery High kind of works, but a lot of the stuff that works about it is stuff that he is lamenting and stuff that was added in post. And it's like the way he talks about it is if he had, they had shot this thing that was ready to be released film, and then it was, as he calls it in some ways, butchered, and then in other interviews he did calls it sodomized. And I find it kind of hard to believe that there was this really like cohesive, well-structured thing that was then mangled by the studio entirely. I do think he probably had an artistic vision for something that wasn't fully realized, but how much of that is like delusions of grandeur and how much of that is legit studio interference, I don't quite know. And so I want to say, like, I don't know that to be true about him. I'm kind of making that up based on what I've read of the way he's spoken about these movies. But like, I mean, Nick, you've interacted with him. So am I wrong about that? Is he an amiable enough guy?
Listen, to me, he was always fantastic. I know in the past few years, I mean, he put out a set of Psychos in Love trading cards. I bought them because he knew it. And other people I know who are fans of the film, they think he's getting a little too, I don't know, I don't want to say desperate, but he's trying to make whatever money he can. That doesn't bother me. Gorman as a person, he's always been solid with me. He's always given me of his time. I wish I could have gotten more into, I'm sure if I messaged him now, I could have had a reason to, but he's the kind of guy, if you meet him somewhere and you asked him some technical stuff, for example, like you would want to know about Cemetery, I'm sure he'd sit down and talk with you about it.
Well, that's good to know. So now the estate of Gorman Bechard can stop their cease and desist letters from coming to me for all of the slanderous things that I said in the last episode. I think I kind of, I think I gave a disclaimer that it's like, I don't know this to be true. I'm saying this based on what I'm just kind of how I'm reading the way he's responding to some of these things. And I think it carries on a little bit into Galactic Gigolo too, my general overall feeling about it. So Steve, why don't you hit us up with some stats about this one?
Absolutely. Well, Galactic Gigolo was released January 29th, 1988. It's directed by Gorman Bechard, written by Bechard and Carmine Capobianco, and it stars Carmine Capobianco, Debbie Tibble. I get that wrong every time. Tybo, thank you. Debbie Tybo, Frank Stewart, Ruth Collins, Michael Citroniti, J.E.L. Gitter, and Donna Davidge. Yeah, like I said, this is the second movie of 3 that he would produce that were picked up by Charles Band. So the first was Psychos in Love, which was kind of a minor cult hit when it came out at the time. Charles Band picked it up and distributed it through, was it Wizard Video, or was it, it was Urban Classics, but it was also like
Wizard Video.
It was a Wizard Video. I can picture the cover. Wizard did it. Yeah. I can picture the cover with the too gory for the silver screen logo.
Yeah. Absolutely. So he picked that one up. I think he was interested in working with him. And I think, like you said, Nick, they kind of already had these next 2 movies basically in the can, like, because Cemetery High and Galactic Gigolo both come out within, I mean, all 3 of these movies come out between 1987 and 1989. So pretty quick turnaround, pretty low budget. And I think they just kind of had a couple of these locked and loaded and ready to go. This one was released in alternative titles, including the one I watched on Tubi. On Tubi, this is branded as Mr. Galactic. It's also called Club Earth in some markets. So you can get it in a couple different places.
It's really hard to read the words Mr. Galactic and not hear it in like the Beastie Boys. Like
I did that too. I totally did that too. Yeah, and the cover art that you see on this one is kind of a wacky cartoon. The main alien character looks, I mean, nobody on this cover looks anything like anybody in these movies. No. Like, it's just a completely unrelated drawing of a guy in a spaceship with some hot broads. But you know, that's kind of about the beginning and end of it. This is using a lot of the same repertory cast that he's been using for a lot of these movies. Frank Stewart's in all of these, Debbie's in all of these, Ruth Collins I think is in at least 2 out of 3. So, you know, and there's a lot of familiar faces popping up here and there. Yeah. The premise, now I had the fun experience of, so I woke up, I had an early shift today, so I woke up very early and watched this movie before work, which was a fun vibe to get into. And then I had the pleasure of getting to describe what this movie was about to my fiance, now wife, by the time you're listening to this. So the log line here is that a piece of space broccoli wins a intergalactic game show, and his prize is that he gets to come to the horniest place in the entire galaxy, which turns out is Prospect, Connecticut. And then he gets to assume any humanoid form that he wants, and so he chooses the form of a lovable sleazebag, his terms, and he teleports to Earth, where he's immediately irresistible to women, to the point that it attracts the attention of both the mafia, which is in Connecticut, apparently 4 people in a room saying duh, duh, duh a lot, and a family of inexplicably Jewish rednecks who are furious that he's coming there and trying to steal their women. And so he basically becomes the subject of a manhunt. In the meantime, Debbie is playing a reporter who is following him and kind of trying to learn his life story, because really everybody is taking the space alien thing in stride.
They really are. I mean, there's a lot of hubbub. There's a lot of frabba jabba, if you will, that we need.
There's too much frabba jabba
in this movie. So right there, I would say, yeah, I think one of the issues I have with this movie, and I recognize saying this is so dumb when you're talking about a movie as gleefully stupid as Galactic Gigolo is, but like I found, like with Psychos in Love, the conceit of the movie, like the plot structure, you know, it keeps going, and then there's all these little asides and these little gags, and they feel more purposeful. Here it's almost just like kind of a kitchen sink of like, here's something we think is funny, here's something we think is funny. It might not make sense why it's happening now, but it's like, yeah, but it's gonna, and there's occasionally they do hit, but I did find that, like, and this is true, I've found of their other movies, is like when they like something, in true Seth MacFarlane fashion, they will hammer it into the ground. And like this, they do that here, but to me it's like, I think it's an aesthetic in this one. So in Psychos in Love, it's how Carmine Capobianco hates grapes. Sure. And I think that gag is hilarious, and I never get tired of it in the movie. And then in Cemetery High, it's when the characters are propositioning sex, and they say, "I'll do anything,
Mhm.
anything, anything you want, anything I want," and it's just like a 45-second back and forth, which they do multiple times in the movie. Here, I felt like it was more visual. Like I felt like here they're like the visual of a bunch of rednecks with like a Jewish patriarch who are running around to Hava Nagila being played on banjo and Jew's harp
Yeah.
was like this well they kept going back to. And it was like, I found it kind of funny initially because it's just so out there. But they're like, I was getting kind of tired of just having those characters on screen, like at later times when they were just kind of bumbling around a bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If I could add, when I had first saw the film, the first time that the Jewish hillbillies are introduced, the father is chewing on this big piece of matzah. Now that killed us. We were cracking up. Now, when I revisited it last week, I saw it many times, but I hadn't seen it in a while. I mean, I chuckled at it, but the crowd I saw it with were young. We were all teenagers, and everyone cracked up. It makes me think in today's PC climate, are they still going to find this kind of humor? You know what I'm saying? Would a modern audience find any of it? It really isn't too funny of a film, but would they find any of this funny?
I hate to use that phrase. Like when you see it's very like, I feel like now it's basically held on to for like YouTube comments, but where it's just like, this would never be made today. But it's like very true here because I'm not that young. Like I'm not a Gen Z, like a film goer in 2026. Like I grew up in, a time when there were some pretty problematic movies that were very well regarded and big hits and, cultural landmarks and conversations and things like that. And that was the first thing I had too. Like instinctively as a 45-year-old, when they showed him with the matzah, I laughed. Because it was just like, that was my gut instinct, was to laugh at the fact that they chose that detail. At no point did I think it was like, occasionally with some of the language and things later, it's maybe a little bit more like poking fun, but I didn't even really think of it in the moment that they were trying to say anything negative by having him eating a matzah. It's just as a weird stereotype, that detail that they decided to put in that scene. And I thought it was actually kind of the detail that needed, because I don't know, it makes it inherently funnier, I think, to cut to him that way than it is to just cut to him with the hat and sideburns and all of those things. Like
and like I think you were mentioning, that was an issue I had with it even the first time I seen it. You had all these funny group of these hillbillies, and then the gangsters, even though I had a big issue with the gangsters. It's like they didn't know where to go with it. Whereas the gangsters in a film like Street Trash, I mean, the best part of that film to me, besides the effects, was the very end scene, which was just a mob takeoff.
Yeah.
They just didn't know I don't think Gorman knew what to do with those characters after a while.
Well, this is a very specific genre of humor that I think is like largely dead at this point. Maybe we can find a way to name it. It's of a kind with like Playboy comic strips or Leisure Suit Larry video games.
Oh,
like
you're missing it, Steve. No. You're missing it. This is the most Benny Hill ass movie we've ever watched.
Benny Hill. It's there's some Benny Hill in there. It's the whole idea of like kind of a schlubby weirdo who's hyper confident and like somehow has all this, like all the ladies kind of after him all the time. That I don't know where that trope came from. I don't even think it started with Benny Hill.
I'm sorry, when I mentioned to Gorman, there's a film from '75 called Wham Bam Thank You Spaceman, and I asked him, because there's a whole subgenre that's like sci-fi sex comedy. Going back to Flesh Gordon, and I jotted Spaced Out was another one, he had no idea what I was talking. He thought the title was great.
Yeah.
But there was in the 70s a lot of these, Flesh Gordon. There was one called 2069, A Sex Odyssey. These R-rated sex comedies that were more solid comedies than Galactic Gigolo.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of it had to do with the budget. For some reason, like even Flesh Gordon, they had money to do this great stop motion at the towards the end and everything.
Yeah.
Gorman didn't have any money, so he just, threw Carmine in the silver suit.
Yeah.
And made fun of stereotypes. But
and Carmine is, I will say, like, he's definitely game. Like, he's, he's not, and I think this was kind of true of Psychos in Love too, but Psychos in Love has such a DIY kind of feel to it, where it's like they're doing something with no budget, but there's a lot of ingenuity. And I felt like in Psychos in Love, it's like Carmine Capobianco is not even really giving a performance per se, but that's okay, because there's almost like a Clerks style documentary feel to Psychos in Love. And I feel like here it's kind of the same thing. Like, he's really not giving a performance, but he's just kind of smiling and smirking through the whole thing. Like, if you didn't, I feel like maybe a discernible viewer, if you didn't know better, would watch this and be like, did this guy write the movie? Because he has kind of like I'm a writer of this movie feeling. And, Nick, I was surprised to hear you say, that you didn't really love what Gorman and Carmine did with the mobsters, because you are an Italian American, and I just was under the assumption that you drove around arguing while the Tarantella plays in your car.
I mean, they're funny for 2 seconds, and then he made them too stupid. I mean, it was too much,
Yeah. Well, we didn't really even talk in Cemetery High at all about Michael Citronini, who appears in a lot of Charles Band movies after this. I mean, he's credited as J.W. Para, as Myron Stackpole in Head of the Family.
Yeah.
He is, he's in Dr. Lorca, I believe, right? In The Creeps.
In Hideous.
In Hideous, sorry, yeah.
He's
no,
in Demonic
he would
Toys
appear
too.
a lot.
Yeah.
He is in Demonic Toys too. And he also appeared in Cemetery High as the Private Eye.
So this must be their first kind of interaction. This must be the kind of how he sort of got into this whole Full Moon universe. Because he became like a writer and a producer, and sort of he stuck around for a couple of decades of Full Moon. And he's, again, I think everybody here is game. Like, everybody looks like they're having a good time. They're playing it very big, but that's obviously the intention of the movie. And the wackiness can sometimes, like, not all the jokes land, but I always respond to movies like this that have just sort of a get all your friends together and get a video camera and make whatever you can sort of energy. Like, it's very Muppet Show, but like dirty. I don't know. It's got that kind of like good-natured vibe to it that I always.
Oh, your favorite Muppet is it Big Peter Dick?
He's a pretty good Muppet. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, I mean, there's just not for all the like the kind of plotty shenanigans that are going on here on paper. Like, there's not a whole lot of action going on. There's a lot of people in rooms like trading quips at each other. Lots of one group kidnaps them, then another group kidnaps them, then another group kidnaps them. Like, they keep going kind of back and forth.
There's a feeling in this movie, and it's weird to me that this came out so quickly on the heels of Psycho in Love, because I feel like this has a very like sophomore film feeling of people liked what we did in Psychos in Love, therefore all our ideas must be good. And so we're gonna add these things in here even if they don't necessarily belong. Because I will say there is a scene where, like, I think it's Frank Stewart's character, or no, it's not Frank. Maybe I forget whose character it is, but he says the line, "Did you fuck my wife?" Yeah. And then I went, before 3 beats happened, and my brain went, "Oh wow, they're making a Raging Bull reference," and then it turns into a full blown Raging Bull cosplay for a minute, and I was like, who is this for?
Yeah, I think I don't want to overinflate what Psychos in Love was doing, but like, it also it was a movie that felt like it had a little more to say. It seemed like it was written with the experience of somebody who was lonely and trying to find love and struggling with the dating scene and struggling to connect with people, you know. And it wasn't just because there were, you know, mass murders going on. That felt like it was coming from a real place, you know. And in its better moments, that movie seems to be aping like Woody Allen or Albert Brooks in
Mhm.
trying for kind of like a very honest sort of modern take on dating, just intercut with wackiness and gore and TNA and all the hallmarks that make these movies what they are.
Right. And I think in Psychos in Love, you don't even necessarily have scenes that feel like they're deliberately aping someone like Woody Allen. It just has that feeling of how the movie's written. Whereas here, there's a scene with Carmine Capobianco and Debbie Tybel where they're sitting and it's basically all in black like a Brechtian set, and then there's the illuminated "Eat at Joe's" sign, which is like very much trying to, I think, evoke like a Woody Allen aside or something between a couple of characters. But all of that said, like there are moments when stuff really does hit. I like when there was when they were talking in the beginning during the You Bet Your Fertilizer game show about these are the only forms that you can take when you win your trip to Prospect, Connecticut. And one of them that they described was chinless pervert. And I was like, that's funny. And there was definitely, starting with the game show, I thought there was a very kind of DIY UHF feeling, which I appreciated. Like that, I think, came through. And probably the biggest laugh that I think I got in the movie was when the cheerleaders are being interviewed about why they think Eoj is so sexy. And the one woman goes, he's just so Foghorn Leghorn-esque.
Yeah.
I guess.
I was like, I don't get that, but it's funny. And that's I think maybe like what is charming in ways about this movie, but also its biggest detractor is it's like this movie plays like these are some stuff that was, sometimes you have a sense of humor that just connects with someone, and like inside jokes or things that are funny to the two of you don't always translate to other people.
Yeah.
Like here, I feel like what we're really getting is like two like things that both Gorman and Carmine think are very funny, but they don't always necessarily translate on screen, except for the wardrobing of I forget one of the redneck guys. I forget all the names, all the hyphenate names. I forget exactly who it was.
It's like Jimmy Joe Bob Goldberg or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Was one of them has a pair of long pajamas on that say 1986 National Shit Shoveling Champion on the back of them. And I was like, whoever found this
I
for
would wear
wardrobe,
that shirt.
or like someone, or it could just be something that they had somebody who was kind of costume designing and made that. And if they made that, that's really funny. And there's just things like that, I think, work throughout the movie. It's just like, I wonder sometimes like what exactly it's in service of, other than just allowing two people to see these gags that they think are hilarious on screen.
Yeah.
In a few of Herschel Gordon Lewis's earlier films, which is what some of this reminded me of, which I'm a huge Herschel fan. That's why this film worked for me. One of his earliest films was called The Adventures of Lucky Pierre, and there was another one called the hell was the name of it? The Immoral Mr. Tease was another famous nudie cutie. And Carmine's character kind of acted like the guys in those films. I asked Carmine about that. He said that wasn't their inspiration. They were looking as more as a modern comedy. Yet the way they talk, aside from the dialogue between Carmine and Debbie, which, as you said, is very Annie Hallish, so to speak. To me, that's what I loved about the film. I love hearing those two characters talk. It reminded me of their conversations in Psychos in Love. But the rest of the talking in the film, to me, sounded out of time. It sounded like it was from like an exploitation film that was maybe from the early 60s, late 50s.
I would agree with that. And then also some like Marx Brothers or something thrown in there too.
I mean, we had a full-on Groucho Carrot, the very first scene. Like, I've got, you're not really used to a movie just like starting, no title cards, no build up or anything. This is a movie that literally just starts, and the first thing you see is a man dressed like a carrot, dressed like Groucho Marx, which is a little jarring thing to watch at 5:30 in the morning. I will tell you that. But either way, sure. I think there's a little bit of Marx, but it definitely does feel out of time. It feels like a campy throwback to like sci-fi movies of the 60s a little bit, but it's really more of like a sex comedy. The alien stuff is largely incidental after the beginning and ending.
And upon revisiting it, for a film that was billed as I think it said an extraterrestrial sexual comedy, there's very little sex and nudity in it, which I thought was, for a film that I went to Times Square to see, it was just strange. I mean, it still worked for what it was, but if you're going to see that, you'll be disappointed.
Well, that was kind of the case with Cemetery High too, where it was like they seemed a lot less interested in the TNA aspect of that, and than they were in telling the revenge story. And so, the stuff that Gorman Bechard apparently hated, that Kenneth J. Hall and Charles Band threw into that movie, like the hooter honk and the gore gong and stuff, were, it was almost like I think we talked a little bit in that episode about how it was almost a reference to the fact that there's very little of it. Like it was almost like the movie calling itself out. Like if they're okay, we're going to honk the horns now in lieu of some actual TNA, in lieu of some gore. We're going to hit this gong, because a lot of that was just like cutting back to, a murder happening sort of off screen, or like someone, very weakly swinging an axe or a knife and then having a little spatter of blood on the wall behind them or something like that. So a lot of it wasn't even really shown.
I was so excited from reading it in Fangoria when I was really young to see that film Cannibal Girls, because they had, I forgot what they called it, they would ring something like a gore gong. And I thought that film was terrible, but I don't know if they thought this was a new gimmick for Galactic Gigolo or not, but it didn't work in either film. Excuse me, for Cemetery High, not Galactic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a cute conceit. And from what we understand, like that was not initially like that big of a part of the movie, and I think that was the element that they seized on and sort of like repeated. It became a runner throughout that film. I still think it's funny. The hooter honk just really made me laugh every time. And yeah,
it's a mix of things. It's not just the name hooter honk. I mean, alliterative, obviously kind of funny, but it was just the bare bones design of just like a pole with two bicycle horns on it. Yeah. Like a no frills. Like this is clearly was shot in 2 seconds as an insert with somebody just holding their hands up to honk the two horns. And it's like cut, print, beautiful. We have this insert that we can go back to numerous times. Yeah, I don't know. It made me laugh, and stuff in this movie made me laugh. Even though I felt like it just was kind of, I found myself going every once in a while. There would be a gag that would make me chuckle, but then like I would find myself kind of like bored with the movie as I was going from like plot point A to plot point B, and like, okay, now these characters are in this setting, and now it's kind of more of the same. And now Michael Citroniti said, cut the frabba jabba 10 more times, like he says. But one of them that got a good laugh out of me is like there's like a carnival barker guy selling snacks towards the end.
Yeah.
And he is like, all of a sudden, like Frank Stewart's character buys a blow up sex doll from him, and then he's like, all right, he turns around and all of a sudden he's got popcorn, peanuts, and vibrators, and then he comments on the fact that shouldn't be there, and he even like he's getting out of frame and he says, you got that improv you wanted, look how it goes sometimes. Like it's just kind of a funny line, like he is just saying like, yeah, that didn't really work, did it, like winking a bit at the camera. And that much I could appreciate. There were enough moments like that. But the thing that I kind of come back to with this movie is that like I don't see, it's harder for me to understand the vision of what they were really trying to make with this movie than it is with Psychos in Love, and even was with Cemetery High, because to hear Gorman Bechard talk about how colorful and comic book like the movie was before it was then sodomized and edited heavily and having all the color correction or whatever taken out to make it so muted and lifeless looking, I don't know how much of that I believe to be true, because I look at something that Empire would have been making at the same time, something that this movie lifts its credit sequence almost directly from, which is Terror Vision. And like TerrorVision is so colorful. And like, yeah, maybe TerrorVision had a bigger budget and Charlie Band had a little more faith in Ted Nicolau as a person to helm that movie. And so there was a lot more care and studio backing in a movie like that. But that movie has what I think maybe is what Gorman is saying was like the stylistic design and color palette that this movie was supposed to have, but I just don't see it. I just think what's happening is it was, you know, there was a sort of a vision that they had, and maybe they had grander ambitions for the movie that they were actually making, and then the fact that it was kind of, they were handcuffed kind of in having it totally come to fruition pissed him off a bit, because you know, there's another movie that he made called The Kiss, which was kind of his comeback movie in 2003, which by all accounts is like one of the better movies that he's made, but he's grieved that movie retroactively also. Like he has gone on since to be like, this movie was kind of butchered once it was taken out of my eyes. This seems to be like a common thing that we're seeing with him. And I felt like with Psychos in Love, it was, you knew exactly what they were trying to do. With Cemetery High, there was a little more of a seedling of like, okay, I can actually see in this movie where there's artistic vision and where there's studio meddling. Here it's blurry. Here I can't really tell. Yeah. And I feel like it makes the movie kind of less successful in that way. I mean, you know, are there worse ways that I've spent 80 minutes of my life? Absolutely. And did I laugh at certain scenes? I did, but I just felt like it was muddled, and I don't know that you can obviously point to, oh, well, here is where the filmmakers were kind of handcuffed by studio interference. Like, what do you think, Nick, when you think about these movies?
When I read that in a couple interviews with him. My whole thing was, where were these colors going to go? What sequences were they going in?
Right.
Most of the whole finale's outdoors, with that hilarious use of the ironing board, one of my favorite scenes. Yeah, I don't buy it. I love Gorman, but he, and maybe he's listening to this, I don't know, but you know, he's a decent filmmaker. He's a pretty good novelist. He wrote a novel called Balls. It's about the first woman to make it into the major leagues. It's really good. And I'm like, why doesn't he make that into a film, you know?
Yeah, right. He's remained pretty prolific.
Galactic Gigolo really had it was like an extended SNL sketch to me.
You know? Yeah. Yeah, which, you know, sometimes I'm on board for. You know, I was struggling a little bit just like physically watching the movie. I watched it on Tubi, and like these are shot like on very rudimentary cameras back in the 1980s, and they haven't been super well preserved. So like the audio's pretty muddy, the visuals don't really pop. So they could use like a restoration or like a cleanup, or even just at least subtitles would have helped me. But yeah, they didn't really have. It was a very no frills kind of transition that they have on Tubi, and you know, so that's a little bit of an element with these movies too. It's just that they haven't been super well maintained, but yeah, like you mentioned, like Gorman Bechard has stayed fairly prolific. I think most of the films he makes are documentaries these days, but he made a documentary about The Replacements. He's made a couple of like music documentaries, and he's a novelist, yeah, as well. So, and I do think the writing and the script, like I think a lot of the jokes are funny, or at least they understand the rhythms of comedy better than a lot of other movies that we've covered that have tried to be funny. I think this understands the rhythms and the setup and the payoff of a punchline. And
if you're a person who has ever hoped in your life that you would see a movie in which an alien broccoli takes on the form of a schlubby man wearing an Elvis sequin suit, simply for the payoff of a post-coital interaction where he can say, "She made my Brussels sprout,"
yeah,
then this is the movie for you.
That's pretty much, yeah. Which I wanted. I'm curious if they were aware of the whole ET thing when they made this, like, because ET, for those who don't know, like they would release some like novels of that series, like you know, in lieu of a proper sequel, where they reveal that ET is basically like vegetative. He's actually like a fungus, basically. more than an organism. So I'm wondering if they were thinking about this as like a space vegetable kind of thing. The minor moment when space vegetables were in the zeitgeist.
I meant to say earlier, when you were talking about that color scheme, the main reason I find that BS is because when, Eoj turns back into the broccoli, I mean, what was the effect? They pretty much ran water tubes up the back of his shirt and make it look. It was, so come on.
Yeah.
That was the budget they were working with.
Yeah. Which, you got to lean into it. You got to lean into it. There's, your budget is your budget, and not everybody can get like, 240 million to make the Odyssey. You gotta make what you can. And that's why it'll always appeal to me.
Yeah. I just feel like one of the more interesting aspects of this movie is the fractured relationship between Charles Band and Gorman Bechard. Like, I just think in reading about how much vitriol he had in those interviews he gave. I mean, he was a young man, so I guess at that time you're being interviewed about something that's kind of fresh. You may, choose some more, I don't know how to say this, like dramatic words, but, he did in multiple publications say that there was a long time where he wanted to slice up Charlie Band's face with a broken beer bottle. So, I mean, though that's in print.
Oof.
I think it was in Cinema Fantastique or something like that. Like there's a lot of interviews like that where he, and he kind of did a version of that in the IMDb comment that Steve brought up before. We talked about that one in Cemetery High. He just has this like passionate hatred that I'm sure has cooled, over the past subsequent 30 years. But it's very funny to see, like, I don't know. And this is what made me have that kind of feeling about him, and his approach to art. It was just kind of like, did he really think he was making great art? Like his responses would have you believe he did. Or was he just like a super cocky young guy who was like, how dare, someone come in and kind of handcuff me and do this? But he really minces no words when he talks about Charles Band in all of the pulled sections of interviews. And I find that, because we mentioned this very briefly in the Cemetery High episode 2, is that like, and I'm not trying to say that Charles Band is a saint. By all accounts, when you're kind of the grifter in some ways that Charles Band can certainly be, at least, thrifty and creative the way that he throws money around. I'm willing to bet there are plenty of people who've been on the wrong side of that financially, who've been like Gorman Bechard, kind of in the wrong side of it creatively.
Yeah.
But you do find a lot of people who go back and continue to work with him. Like it's documented at least 3 or 4 times where Gorman Bechard is like, the best thing that happened to me at that time in my life was Empire going bankrupt.
Well, Gorman, when I last saw him in 2017 at the Q&A for Psychos at the Nighthawk, and Matt would tell you this, someone had asked him about the whole Charles Band thing, and he was just very laid back the whole night. He didn't speak about it angrily. He just gave the facts, and so whatever his reviews, now I want to go read them. I haven't read the ones on IMDb, but however he spoke, he doesn't seem, he seems like he's over it.
I'm going to chalk it up to him being just kind of like a cocky, emotional, young guy.
Sure. You want some control over your creative vision, and like, I can understand, and he's hardly the first filmmaker to have a beef with a producer over an editorial decision or a distribution decision or anything like that. Like it's a very common thing, and it is much more common when you're like young and trying to kind of make your bones a little bit. But
Nick, I want to ask you, if you're okay, so you saw this on 42nd Street. There are certain itches for that kind of experience that this scratches, but maybe not, the full-blown exploitation. If you were like trying to set the tone and recreate that 42nd Street sleazy vibe for a person, what would be like 1 or 2 of your kind of gateway 42nd Street movies that you would introduce someone to?
Wow. Well, one of the first ones I saw up there was one of those Mondo films, and it was called look at this, I'm forgetting it. Well, there was a million of them. Of course,
Yeah.
Faces of Death never played up there. Oh, this one, not Trap Them and Kill Them. Yeah, there was a film of Cannibal Holocaust played.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
When that came out in, I think it was 85, it finally came out. Everyone went up there to see it. So and it's playing in theaters now again. Well, it's coming back to theaters. I'm trying to think of the name of the, there was a million of these Mondo Magic type of movies, and I went to see one, and it wasn't that great. Again, you could tell half of it was BS, but a lot of those movies were like watching National Geographic specials, but Mondo films were a huge part of Times Square back then.
Oh, yeah.
And also, I never saw one up there, but two of the Ilsa films always played as second features,
Oh, damn.
especially
That's-
She-Wolf. That played with Death Wish too when it came out. So
I've never
That-
taken the plunge on the Ilsa series. I've always been
they're
a little skittish around those.
yeah, well, they're just extreme women in prison type of things.
Yeah, that's a genre we kind of tiptoe around a little bit. It's like, so, and I think that could be said of this movie too, although I feel like this movie is not like egregiously offensive per se, but this is very much like a product of its time. And I think, again, like in 2026, I'm going to approach this by saying, like, I still find it a little bit off-putting when I go back to these movies and I see multiple uses of like the F slur early on where they don't really need to have it. It's like if you're establishing like really like how should I say this, like characters that are bigots, or if you want to really portray that they are prejudiced people, then like I guess that makes sense. But if it's just like they're a substitution for another word for a person that's just very much of that time, you would see that pop up. And so like that's obviously something they wouldn't do now. And so like this is a movie as a product of its time. And I think we sometimes fall, unless something is made with very poor intentions. Like a lot of times we look at these products of their time and kind of accept what they are and just go like, yeah, this was stuff that people were laughing at. Some of it still holds up. Other stuff is a little bit outdated and antiquated and a little cringy and things like that. But I definitely think that that's the approach to take with a movie like this. And then occasionally, like whereas I feel like Psychos in Love transcends that, I don't think this one necessarily does. But that doesn't mean it can't be enjoyed. But I definitely think it's like, as someone who consumes so much exploitation media, it's like that always is in the forefront. I always have to approach these movies as a product of their time, because you want to be careful sometimes with what you give an endorsement to people who haven't seen these movies.
It just hit me. The film was called Savage Man, Savage Beast. And when we get done, Google the poster. It's one of the greatest exploitation posters you've ever seen. But I found out years later, thanks to my friend 42nd Street Pete, it was originally called something like Mondo Magic. And it's just your run-of-the-mill, like I said, National Geographic type of film.
There is a real National Geographic quality to that.
Yeah. Well, I think we've basically run the gamut on Galactic Gigolo here. Thank you so much, Nick, for lending your expertise here and some perspective on the collaboration here. This is the last of the Gorman, Bechard, and Carmine Capobianco movies we're going to be covering. And there were a few more collaborations that they did before and after, but these are the ones that are kind of within our purview, and I'm sad to see them go. They were an interesting, entertaining little diversion, even if they didn't always totally work.
And Nick, I want to say, like, I knew that you would be a good person to have for this episode, because you recently put out a book called Dark Dreams, which I'm holding in my hand right now. I know this is terrible radio, but I'm holding a copy of Nick's book in my hand. And the kind of subtitle of the book says, "An obsessive look at Romano Scavolini's Nightmare." And Nightmare is a fascinating movie, and I love the fact that you wrote this book because anyone who is willing to do an obsessive look at any of these kind of low budget or forgotten movies is a friend of mine. That is the approach that I appreciate towards things like that. I mean, Steve and I love to dig into these largely forgotten movies and give them more attention, and shine a spotlight on them more than maybe other people have. So I would love for people to find out where they can buy this book, and just quickly kind of pitch us on like how you came up with the idea to do the book and what it's all about.
Sure. That book's available from a UK publisher called Head Press. They're a very well-respected film and counterculture publisher. They do a lot of music books too. They also did my first book, Suburban Grindhouse, and it's on Amazon and pretty much everywhere. The reason I did a book about Nightmare is when I had first seen it, everything was double features in the 80s. I saw it with Mother's Day. And Nightmare was the second film, and there was just something about it. And as I state in my introduction, it was more the reaction to the crowd outside after the film than the actual film. I had never seen people freak out over special effects like to that. Again, this is 3 years after Dawn of the Dead was out, and I don't know. But anyway, and I just, at the time I thought it was this typical slasher, and there's just something about it that grew on me. And I became obsessed with it and eventually met someone who starred in it. And
cool.
And David, who works the main editor at Head Press, he's a big fan of it because that was one of the first video nasties in the UK on the Nightmares and the Damaged Brain. So as soon as I told him I was working on it, he said, send me that shit as soon as you're done.
Well, what you'll have to do now is you'll have to write another book where you do an obsessive look into the movie Don't Open Till Christmas.
It's a short book. It's a short book.
Yeah. Yeah. But no, yeah, everybody definitely jump out and grab Suburban Grindhouse and Dark Dreams. You're definitely going to really enjoy them. If you enjoy the show that we do every single week, the best way to show us is to go on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave us a little 5-star rating and maybe a review. Just helps the show reach more eyes and helps to widen our audience a little bit. You could keep up with what we're doing week to week on Instagram. You can follow us at puppetmasters_castlefreaks, or you can follow me at _Giallo_Jared. We will have the audio versions of our show on our YouTube channel, so please subscribe to that. We update on the Facebook group and Threads and Blue Sky on day of releases, so no shortage of ways to find the show and keep up with what we're doing. Maybe we'll do more content, maybe we won't, because Steve has so much going on. Aside from being exhausted from just having recently gotten married, Steve, what else have you got going on?
Well, I also host the show Cinema Arcade. That is cinema and arcade mashed together. That is what we do. We are watching movies and then playing the video games based on those movies to see how they contrast and compare. And largely it just gives us an opportunity to talk about a really wide swath of movies, everything from Austin Powers to Cliffhanger to the Space Jam movies to Vertigo to Stalker to all kinds of. We're really going to run the gamut on that show. So definitely check that out wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to tune in to us next week because, believe it or not, we are coming back with another episode, and it's going to be a very exciting one. We are talking about the movie Zarkor the Invader. That's right. We are entering into kaiju territory for the first and one of only two instances where we're going to talk about giant monsters as opposed to tiny monsters. And we have a really terrific guest joining us for that episode. Very thematically appropriate, we'll say. I'll just tease it from there.
Yeah. Everyone is going to be very excited about that. So make sure that you tune in next week for Zarkor the Invader. Thank you again to Nick Cato for taking the time to talk about the last of these Gorman, Bechard, and Carmine Capobianco movies. And for the final time on our show, cut the frabba jabba.